How many of you have learned or tried to learn another language? Show of hands. Almost everybody. Now, of those of you, how many of you have learned or tried to learn another language as an adult? Raise of hands. All right. As an adult and someone who has learned and still learning another language, the notoriously difficult German language, I feel with you. And as an organizational psychologist, I've come to realize that there's another language that we never formally study, yet we rely on every single day, the language of emotion. And just like learning a language as an adult, it needs practice and patience and, let's be honest, a sense of humor, because you're going to get things wrong. You're going to misinterpret signals and mix up meanings. It's exciting, but it's vulnerable. You open up a window into your inner world, and you hope that people understand you. And you hope that people don't correct your grammar too harshly. And then there are these little successes. You order a coffee and you answer all the follow-up questions, or you crack a joke in the other language and somebody actually laughs. And just like learning another language, learning the language of emotion consists of 3 key pieces. The first is mastering your vocabulary, because you can't manage emotions you don't have words for. The second is accepting emotions more broadly, both the positive and the negative, the quiet and the loud ones, because all emotions have something to tell us. And third is being expressive and using that emotional vocabulary in the conversations we have with others to reach greater clarity, both for ourselves and for others. And so that we all leave here today speaking a little bit more confidently this language of emotion, allow me to dive into these 3 pieces in more detail. First, mastering your vocabulary. The world of emotions is complex. So let's start with the building blocks, what psychologists call primary emotions. They're largely universal across cultures, and they're also found in the animal kingdom. Psychologists generally agree on 6 primary emotions: anger, fear, disgust, joy, sadness, and surprise. It's kind of like learning those first critical words in another language, like, hello, how are you, and what is the Wi-Fi password? And just like learning another language, those words, those basic words, will only get you so far. It's like knowing enough German to buy a ticket at the train station. It's helpful, but it's limited. So sometimes we need a more complex vocabulary for more complex, nuanced experiences, like not having bought enough train tickets for you and your visiting family and having to argue with the train ticket controller why they should not fine you. And these secondary emotions that develop over time, they expand and refine our vocabulary, and that makes us uniquely human. Second is accepting emotions more broadly. One of the unsung benefits of learning a new language is how much you learn about your mother tongue. So, growing up in the US, I learned that there is one correct answer to the question, how are you? And that's good, maybe great, and if you're really feeling it, awesome. And then I moved to Germany. And I learned that there were a few more options, like, I'm actually not good, or I'm quite stressed today, or I got stuck behind a slow biker, my train was late, and now I have a headache, so I'm grumpy. Acceptance is about speaking about and creating space for a diversity of emotions. It's not just the positive ones that belong at the table. The negative ones, anger, fear, envy, they play a role too. And research shows that when we're more accepting of these negative emotions, it doesn't turn into a downward negative spiral. It actually might alleviate these negative emotions and prevent us from feeling even worse in emotionally challenging situations. Third, and finally, is being expressive and using that emotional vocabulary in our conversations with others. To be clear, there is a difference between naming emotions and being emotional. This isn't about letting your emotions run wild. It's not about yelling when you're angry or sobbing when you're frustrated. This can and does happen, and it does have a time and a place. Sometimes at work, sometimes at home. But what I'm talking about is emotion as information, emotion as context. And that can help us not only with our nonverbal communication, because we can, of course, communicate with our facial expressions and our nonverbal behaviors. And that is important when we're communicating with others. But when we put together with that nonverbal behavior, that emotion word, we provide even better context for the perceiver. Case in point, a recent conversation with my nephew Michael, who's 5. He was sick, and my automatic response was to say, "Oh, I'm sorry you're sick." And he said, "Why are you sorry? You didn't do anything." And I thought, he's right. I said I'm sorry because that's what we say when we want to express emotion, but we skip right over the emotion words. And so I told him, "You're right. I'm sad that you're sick, and I hope that you feel better soon," because that's what I want him to know. And then there are times where we really struggle to say what we truly mean, and we're stretched to the limits of our emotional vocabulary to even attempt to express how we feel, not only to ourselves, but also to others. I personally was tested last year when we lost my dad, the anchor being of our family, suddenly and unexpectedly. Grief is technically one emotion word, but I needed to tap into at least 20 to even attempt to explain how I felt, let alone how it felt watching how this loss affected the ones around me. But to my 5-year-old nephew's astute observation, the more precise we can be in using the words that we actually mean, we actually have a better shot at connecting in even these most complex of human experiences. So, where does that leave us? When we're young, we speak the language of emotion fluently, intuitively. Jump up and down when we're excited. We burst into tears when things don't go our way. We blurt out exactly how we feel, unfiltered. It's raw, it's honest, and it's completely natural. And then something changes. As we grow older, we become more guarded. We worry about when it's appropriate to talk about emotions and how we'll be perceived if we do. We worry that if we use emotion words, we'll be perceived as weak or inappropriately emotional or unprofessional. So we filter, we edit, we hold back. And that once fluent language of emotion becomes harder to speak. But the truth is, no matter how well you speak the language of emotion, emotions are already running the show, whether you acknowledge them or not. So, check in with yourself. What's going on inside you right now? Is joy running the show? Is sadness quietly pushing the buttons in the background? Or is anger holding onto the controls with both hands ready to blow? When we learn to speak the language of emotion, we expand our vocabulary and we're better able to label our own feelings and those of others. We're more accepting of emotions, both positive and negative, and everything in between. And we pave the way for true understanding and connection by using that emotional vocabulary in our conversations with others. And if that's the case, isn't this a language we all want to speak? Even if it might be harder than German? And it is hard. So, as my dad would say, just take it one step at a time. Thank you.